This happened last winter. I was home a lot, working as a freelance graphic designer after being laid off. My small one-bedroom apartment was in an old high-rise. I thought it was just a temporary space to help me focus. I never stopped thinking about what happened. On the third night of winter, things started to change. I was in bed, trying to find inspiration in my sketches while the wind howled outside. The chill crept into my room. Then I heard it, a soft knock. I thought it was the pipes at first, but the knocks became rhythmic. I sat up in bed feeling uneasy but confused. I shook it off and tried to sleep. The knocking didn't stop. I heard it nearly every night at midnight. Lying awake, my heart raced. I thought I heard whispers too. Muffled voices floated through the thin walls. I thought I was losing my mind, or maybe it was just stress. I tried to ignore it. One afternoon I came home and noticed my favorite blanket was folded differently. I was sure I left it draped over the couch. A knot formed in my stomach. I looked around but found nothing. That night the lights flickered. It was a quick stutter, but it made the room feel colder. I felt like I was being watched. Then came the photographs. I opened my mailbox and there they were, strange black and white prints of people I didn't know. Their faces were blurred like shadows. I stared at them, and my heart dropped. I had never seen anyone like them around my building. I felt so uneasy. Maybe I was overthinking it all. Then came the night I saw them. I sat on my couch, trying to drown out the noises in my head when I glanced out the window. Shadowy figures moved past. I swear they were just outside, but I could barely see their shapes. I felt cold and paralyzed. Who were they? I wanted to call a neighbor, but what would I say? My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. I hesitated. I wasn't sure what I should do. Finally, I peeked out the door. I turned the knob slowly. Nobody was there. I leaned against the door, breathing heavily. I told myself it must have been my imagination. But every night after, that familiar knocking returned. It grew louder and more deliberate. What was happening? I felt trapped in my home, filled with doubt and fear. Then, a thought struck me. What if someone was really out there? I didn't know how to handle that. I felt like I was being drawn into something I didn't understand. The whispers grew louder, and my nights grew longer. My world was collapsing around me. In my mind, I could hear the knocks echoing through the hallways. I felt them closing in. I decided to stay up that night, staring at my front door. I imagined I was brave, but I wasn't. I just wanted it all to stop. But I didn't know how. The clock struck midnight. I locked my door and settled in, determined to confront whatever was happening. My heart raced as the familiar knocking echoed through the silence. It started softly, almost like a tap on glass, and then picked up speed, becoming a series of sharp raps. I felt each knock resonate in my chest. I tried to breathe slowly, to think logically. It's just the wind, I whispered to myself. But doubt pressed against my mind like an unwelcome guest. I hadn't felt safe in weeks. I glanced at my tiny kitchen. The shadows seemed to stretch toward me, dark and ominous. Then just as I felt a surge of adrenaline, the knock transformed. It changed from a steady rhythm to a frantic pounding. It shook me, rattling my nerves. I could ignore the soft whispers, but not this. I had to know. Gripping my phone tightly, I forced myself to my feet. I approached the door cautiously, my hand hovering over the knob. In a sudden rush of courage, I twisted it. The door creaked as I pulled it open, revealing only the empty hallway. My heart raced. I felt a rush of cold air. I looked left and right, but there was no one there. As I closed the door, I noticed something in my periphery, a shadow darting down the corridor. Was it real? I stepped forward, peering into the darkness. Hello? My voice echoed, and I immediately regretted it. Silence answered back. I backed into my apartment, my heart pounding. I turned to lock the door again when something caught my eye. In the dim light, I saw a faint outline on the floor. I crouched down and froze. It was a small piece of paper, crumpled. Picking it up, I unfolded it carefully. The ink smelled fresh. Someone is watching you. Chills crawled up my spine. Who sent this? Was it a prank? I glanced around, half expecting someone to jump out. My mind raced. I had to figure this out. I paced around, heart pounding louder than the knocks. I couldn't ignore this. I grabbed the photographs from the mailbox, desperate to find a connection. They were all faces, blurred but menacing. I stared at each one, focusing on the eyes, searching for a hint of recognition. But nothing. Then, an urgent knock sounded again, louder this time, more insistent. I jumped back. Swallowing hard, I returned to the door. I peered through the peephole, my breath caught in my throat. Someone stood there. The figure was shrouded in darkness, but I could see a shape. It was outlined against the wall, almost blending with the shadows. My heart raced as the knocks transformed into frantic banging. I felt pressure rise in my chest. Suddenly, the figure stepped closer, and I stumbled back. I locked my eyes on the door, unable to look away. I could feel my pulse in my ears. And then it happened. The power went out, plunging me into darkness. Before I could react, silence filled the air. A voice whispered from the other side of the door. "Let me in." I backed away, fear surging through me. I had to decide, stay hidden, or confront whatever was out there. I stood frozen, a wave of dread washing over me. The voice lingered in my ears, soft yet sinister. "Let me in." It was like a thread of ice weaving through my veins. I wanted to run, to scream, but the words caught in my throat. I grabbed my phone, the only source of light in the suffocating darkness. I turned on the flashlight, its beam slicing through the shadows. Each flicker played tricks on my mind, making every corner of the room feel alive. "Stay calm," I muttered, but I could feel my breath coming in short gasps. I needed to think. With shaky hands, I moved away from the door, not wanting to be close when it opened. I backed into the living room, keeping my eyes glued to the door. Was someone really out there? Or was my imagination playing games, bouncing off the walls like a trapped animal? As I crouched in the dim light, I noticed my window. My stomach dropped. It was slightly ajar. Had I left it open? Panic coursed through me. I had no memory of doing so, but my mind was racing. I felt exposed, vulnerable. What if someone had already entered my apartment? Then I heard it, a rustling sound coming from the window. I turned my flashlight in that direction and my heart nearly stopped. A figure barely visible through the glass, their silhouette shifting from side to side. Instinct kicked in, and I scrambled to the side, hiding behind the couch. I could hear the soft scrape of something against the window frame. My fingers trembled as I texted a friend. I didn't expect an immediate reply, but I needed to do something. "Please call me," I typed quickly, glancing between the screen and the window. The figure wasn't moving away. It hovered, tapping lightly against the glass. I almost called out, but fear held my voice captive. Instead, I waited, taking a deep breath and trying to slow my racing heart. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, startling me. It was a message. I quickly opened it, but it wasn't from my friend. It was a single word. "Run." That sent my instincts into overdrive. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. My apartment was too small, and I felt trapped. I stood up from behind the couch, ready to make my escape out the back door. But as I did, the whisper returned, now louder. "Let me in." The figure at the window knocked again. This time its urgency felt different, more demanding. My mind screamed to flee, but I was paralyzed. I looked back at the door, heart thudding in my ears, and then a sickening thought crossed my mind. What if the knock at the door hadn't been the same person? I ventured closer to the exit. I was nearly there when I caught a glimpse of the figure through the window. It was turning toward me, revealing a face I recognized. My breath caught in my throat as realization hit. It was someone from the photographs. Somehow, they were here. As I reached for the doorknob, footsteps echoed behind me, louder now. I wasn't alone anymore. My heart raced as I turned, adrenaline coursing through me. There it was, an unfamiliar shadow threading its way into my view. It moved with an eerie fluidity, a dark mass that seemed to absorb the weak light from my phone. I had only a split second to react. The wooden floor creaked beneath me, a cruel reminder of how alone I felt. I sprinted to the back door, my fingers fumbled with the handle. It wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at my throat. I looked over my shoulder. The shadow was getting closer, and I could hear whispers now, indistinct but insistent. "Let me in." Suddenly I remembered the small table by the door. A kitchen knife lay there, glinting under the flashlight's beam. I dashed toward it, the urgency of the moment drowning my thoughts in chaos. Grabbing the knife, I felt a surge of empowerment wash over me. I was no longer just a frightened victim, I was going to fight. I turned, knife in hand, and faced the figure. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out everything except that terrible whisper. As I edged closer to the window, I could see the face more clearly now, and my stomach sank. It was someone I recognized, a girl from the photographs I had seen scattered on my kitchen counter. The one with blue eyes and a haunting smile that seemed to twist into something malicious. "Help me," she pleaded, her voice straining through the barrier of glass. But something about the way her lips moved didn't match the words. They curled around the plea too suggestively, too inviting. Before I could respond, a loud crash resonated from the front of my apartment. The sound pierced the suffocating silence and jolted me back into a state of heightened fear. I dropped my gaze from the window, torn between the girl's eyes and the new threat looming behind me. Footsteps clattered against the floor now, echoing like thunder, punctuating the murmured voices that seemed to swirl around me. "Let me in," they chanted in unison, chilling my blood. Were there more of them? I needed to be quick. In a burst of determination, I dashed toward the living room, glancing back to the window. The girl no longer stood alone. Figures were gathering behind her, faces twisted into unnatural forms I couldn't recognize, yet somehow felt familiar. I could see them moving closer. I reached my phone, planning to call for help, but my screen flickered and went dark. No signal. The reality of my isolation pressed heavily on me. It was as if the walls were closing in, the shadows congealing, and the air thickened with dread. I turned to the back door again, and that was when I saw it, a dark silhouette forming at the edge of the light, just beyond the threshold of my apartment. Someone, or something, was there. The whispers grew louder, and a wave of panic washed over me. I took a step back as the door rattled violently, a hand reaching through the small gap that had started to widen. I knew then that I had to make a choice, fight or flee. But before I could decide, the door burst open, and darkness flooded into the room. The darkness rushed in like a living thing, swallowing the faint glow from my phone. I clutched the knife even tighter, my knuckles whitening. I couldn't see anything clearly, but I could feel the weight of eyes on me, hungry and relentless. A figure stepped through the doorway, outlined in the dimness. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but the silhouette felt wrong. It moved with an unnatural stiffness, like a marionette with tangled strings. My heart pounded louder, drowning out the whispers, and I forced myself to keep my gaze steady. "Who are you?" I managed to croak, my voice sounding small and shakier than I intended. The figure paused, tilting its head as if considering my question. "Do you really want to know?" It replied, the voice low and raspy, echoing unnaturally. The words dripped with malice, and it took a step closer. I stepped back instinctively, but the living room felt too cramped. The walls seemed to press in on me. "Stay back!" I shouted, brandishing the knife. My hands trembled, but I couldn't show fear. Not now. A flicker of movement caught my eye to the left. The girl from the photograph had crossed to the window, her face still barely illuminated. "You can't trust it!" she screamed, panic lacing her voice. The others were behind her now, shifting in a choreographed dance of shadows, each one more grotesque than the last. "Let them in," the figure in the doorway said. "They're your friends." "No!" I yelled. "You're lying!" Suddenly, the front door slammed shut, a violent gust of wind whipping through the apartment. I heard laughter, high-pitched and wicked, filling the space. A rush of cold air followed, snuffing out the last remnants of warmth. Everything became chaotic at once. The lights flickered, casting twisted shadows against the walls. I could feel my breath coming in short gasps as I turned my attention back to the knife. It felt pitiful against the encroaching darkness. I needed to think. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted, directing my anger at the figure. "What do you want from me?" It stepped fully into the light, and my stomach churned at the sight. Its features were blurred, shifting and undulating like smoke, yet I could sense something familiar underneath the chaos. Faces flashed in and out. People I knew, faces from my past. "Don't you remember?" It taunted, the figure melting into another, one that resembled my childhood friend. "You called for help once. We came. But you turned us away." I recoiled. The memories crashed over me like waves, those I hadn't spoken to in years, the ones I'd abandoned in moments of fear. "No," I gasped. "This isn't real." The girl at the window began to scream, a sound filled with anguish. That's when I saw it, the broken glass glinting on the floor beside her. Hope surged through me. If I could just break a window, maybe I could escape. "Let me out!" I screamed, rushing toward her as the whispers swelled again, drowning her cries. But as I reached for her, shadows lunged toward me. Cold hands grasped my arms, pulling me back. "Stay with us," they hissed, and darkness wrapped around me like a shroud. With one final look at the girl, I realized I had to fight harder than ever. Just when I thought I might be lost forever, an idea ignited in my mind. The knife wasn't my only weapon. Desperation surged within me as I prepared to unleash the chaos that had come to claim me. And then everything went dark. I gasped, abruptly pulled back to reality. The darkness buzzed around me, a thick fog that pressed against my skin. My heart raced, but I had no idea how much time had passed. I steadied myself, gripping the knife tightly as I tried to gather what was left of my thoughts. I could feel the shadows lingering, watching me, waiting. A sudden realization hit me. No, I refused to be a victim here. I had to take a stand. It wasn't just the knife. There was something more powerful inside me. My determination. I breathed deeply, focusing on the dim outline of the girl at the window. "Just hang on," I shouted to her, my voice piercing through the haze. "I'm coming for you." The chilling laughter echoed again, mingling with the whispers. The figure in the doorway shifted, and for a moment, I thought I recognized a face among the shifting images. The fear was consuming, but the memory of those I had lost fueled me. I pushed forward, ignoring the icy fingers that clawed at my arms. "Let her go!" I yelled, the knife extending outward as I launched toward the window. I imagined shattering the glass, imagining the freedom that lay beyond. I could just reach it. I could almost feel the cool breeze on my face again. Then, in an instant, all sound ceased. Silence fell like a heavy blanket, and I froze. The girl was no longer at the window. I felt the dense air around me shift as if the whole place had exhaled. "What have you done?" I whispered, suddenly afraid of the solitude. The shadows stirred around me, coiling and twisting like smoke. They crept in closer, almost beckoning, as if they were drawn to my despair. "You shouldn't have shouted," the figure hissed, its form becoming more defined but grotesquely familiar. "Now you will face the consequences." I shook my head. "Stay away from me." And then I felt it, a sensation unlike any other. A sharpness cut through the darkness, a stinging clarity that sliced through my fear. I raised the knife, my grip tightening as I called out the names of my friends, the ones I had neglected. Their memories had become a solid shield around me, giving me strength. "Together, we can fight this," I shouted, channeling every ounce of love and regret I held into the blade. The shadows shrieked, a cacophony of voices twisting into a deafening roar. I felt the warmth of hope push back against the cold. With a primal scream, I lunged forward, aiming the knife at the nearest shadow, the place where the figure stood. The darkness recoiled, splitting apart as I shattered the air around me. For a fleeting moment, a window of light pierced through, glimmering like dawn breaking through night. I could see everything, the faces of my friends smiling, laughing, urging me forward. But then the light faded, and the figure regained its form, even angrier than before. "You cannot escape," it snarled, its eyes burning with fury. "You are ours." Then, without warning, they lunged. I felt the air shift with a force I couldn't comprehend. My breath caught in my throat as they came for me. But there, at the edge of my vision, I saw it again. The glimmering shard of glass on the floor. I had one chance. With all my might, I dove for it, feeling the hands of darkness swipe at my back. I gripped the shard tightly and turned to face my pursuers. I would not go quietly. The knife did not stand alone anymore. As I prepared to confront the shadows, I felt the dread return heavy upon me. But it was met with a rush of resolve. I wouldn't let the darkness win, not tonight. And then, the shadows lunged, and chaos erupted again. I steadied myself, ready to confront the shadows barreling toward me. My heart hammered in my chest, but adrenaline surged through my veins. I swung the shard of glass wildly, slicing through the dark air as I backed away from the advancing figures. The cacophony of their whispers swelled again, drowning out everything else. "Get back!" I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. I could barely tell where the darkness ended and I began. I stumbled back, hand trembling, but I couldn't show fear. Not now. One of the shadows lunged again. I raised the shard just in time, feeling the resistance as it collided with something solid, though it was shrouded in black. The figure emitted a distorted wail, and for a second, it retreated, the edges of their form blurring. I thought I saw the outline of the girl, if only for a brief moment, before the darkness swallowed her whole again. "Come on!" I urged myself, adrenaline pumping harder as I steadied my breath. "You can do this." The laughter returned, now deep and mocking. "You think you can fight us?" The figure surged back, more numerous than before, swirling around me like a storm. I struck again, each blow sending ripples through the mass of darkness. But then, things shifted. I felt the floor under me start to tremble. My balance wavered as cracks appeared, thin lines snaking across the surface. The shadows slowed, as if momentarily distracted by the upheaval in reality. I used that moment to press forward, pushing the shard forward. I was met with another wave of resistance, but this time, I didn't pull back. Then everything went dark. I blinked, trying to grasp what was happening. The shadows vanished, followed by a complete absence of sound. I felt weightless, as if I was floating in space. Panic rose in my throat. Where had the darkness gone? Had I defeated them? But before I could comprehend it, a low rumble echoed from somewhere deep within this nothingness. Fear threaded through me as I realized it was growing louder. The tremors intensified, and the ground beneath me began to shift violently, rendering my footing unstable. Suddenly the shadows re-emerged, but now they were coupled with something else, a low, ominous growl that reverberated around me. I squinted into the dark, heart racing. That sound wasn't just from the shadows. It was something else, something massive. If I thought the darkness had drawn away, I was mistaken. It wasn't retreating. It was only gathering strength. I felt my breathing grow shallow. There was nowhere to run. Then, out of the chaos came a flash, a momentary glimpse of bright light just like before. I saw the girl again, but this time her expression was different. There was urgency in her eyes, a silent plea. "Help me," she mouthed, though no sound escaped her lips. My heart sank. There was more at stake than I hadn't realized. This went beyond me. I had to save her. And then, the growl turned into a shriek, and the darkness lunged at me with renewed ferocity. I had to act. I had to find the light. I couldn't lose. Not now. With determination blazing in my chest, I focused on the girl's fading image. "I'm coming!" I yelled, refusing to back down as the chaos closed in around me. But just as I prepared to fight, I felt a cold hand grasp my ankle, pulling me down. My scream tore through the darkness, but I felt the shadows envelop me once more. This wasn't over. Not yet. I hit the ground hard. The breath knocked from my lungs. Cold tendrils of darkness clawed at me, wrapping tightly around my limbs like chains. I kicked and struggled, panic rising with each failed attempt to break free. The shadows were relentless, fizzing and whispering over me, drowning out my thoughts. "Get off!" I cried, vision blurring as I fought against the grips of the unseen. Just then, a memory flickered through my mind. Something my grandmother had once said about darkness being afraid of light. It wasn't much, but it was enough to light a new fire within me. I forced myself to focus. I could lose myself in despair, or I could find a way out. I grasped the shard of glass tightly in my hand, feeling its familiar shape, the coldness grounding me, reminding me of what I needed to do. If only I could find the light. I could break this grip. With a wild swing, I stabbed forward. My heart leaped as I felt resistance again, but this time it didn't feel solid. Instead, there was a shimmer. It flickered under the darkness, and I grasped its presence. A thread of light tangled in the shadowy mass. "Come on!" I shouted, as I twisted my wrist and turned the shard toward the light. I thrust it with all my might. There was a blinding flash, and everything exploded in a dazzling brilliance. The shadows shrieked and recoiled, their forms disintegrating into 1,000 fragments of darkness that swirled around me before vanishing into the void. The sudden absence of that oppressive weight was like being released from a cage, and I gasped, pulling in the fresh air. But the relief was short-lived, as I realized the light was fading away too. The world around me began to ripple, and I caught a glimpse of colors shifting like oil on water. "Not again!" I muttered, panic creeping back in. I couldn't believe I was still trapped in this nightmarish loop. I needed to find the girl, but the remnants of shadows were reforming, gathering strength as my surroundings began to destabilize. As flashes of brightness flickered, I squinted into the chaos. There was the girl again, her face emerging in the turmoil. But the urgency in her expression was now mixed with a deep fear. "Run," she mouthed, and the moment hung heavy in the air. My heartbeat quickened as the shadows whispered around me, the laughter still taunting, a chorus of voices growing louder, more insistent. "I won't leave you," I yelled back, but doubt gnawed at me. What could I do? Again I felt the coldness creeping into the edges of my mind, swallowing my thoughts. But her eyes sparkled with determination. She seemed to be trying to guide me, and I needed to follow her lead. Just then, I noticed a faint outline of a door materializing in the shifting shadows behind her. It flickered like a candle flame fighting against the wind. Somehow, it felt important. I couldn't see what was beyond it, but I had to take the chance. I lunged toward the girl, my heart racing in sync with the growing roar of darkness behind me. "We can make it," I shouted, feeling the rush of adrenaline propelling me forward. I surged ahead, ignoring the cries of the shadows clawing at my back, and reached for that mysterious door. My fingers brushed against the cool surface, and that's when I felt the grip of the darkness tighten around my throat. I gasped. The shadows yanked me back as the door pulled away from my grasp. I fought desperately. "Let me go." But I couldn't tell if my plea was heard, or if it even mattered. Would I ever escape these dark forces? Just as I felt the darkness close in completely, the door shifted in my peripheral vision, glowing brilliantly at the edges. "Please," I screamed, panic surging as I fought against the shadows. What would happen if I didn't get through? And in that moment of despair, I knew I had one last chance. The moment I felt the darkness closing in, something inside me shifted. It was as if a dormant instinct awakened. I wasn't just going to be consumed, I was going to fight. I summoned every ounce of strength and twisted in the shadow's grasp, desperation fueling my movements. "Not today!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the cacophony of whispers. I dug my nails into the surface of the door, feeling the glow pulse under my fingers. With one last surge of determination, I yanked myself toward it, my body colliding with the frame. The world exploded in light again, but this time it was different. I could feel warmth radiating from the door, mingling with a force that pushed back the darkness. I squeezed my eyes shut and focused on that warmth. The girl's face flickered behind my eyelids, her eyes shining with hope. The shadows screeched, a sound that echoed through my mind, threatening to unravel me. But I couldn't turn back now. I pushed with all my might. Suddenly, the weight on my chest eased, and I staggered through the doorway, tumbling forward into a blinding light. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer surrounded by shadows. Instead, I found myself in a small, dimly lit room filled with antique furniture and dusty books. I took a moment to gather my bearings, confusion flooding over me. Where was I? The door behind me was gone, replaced by a cracked mirror that reflected my breathless silhouette. A shiver ran down my spine. Had I really escaped? As I stood there, letting my eyes adjust, I noticed the girl. She stood in the corner, watching me with a mix of relief and concern. "What happened?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Why did you tell me to run?" She took a hesitant step toward me. "Because the shadows are everywhere. This is only a temporary refuge." "Then we need to get out of here," I said. But something in her eyes told me the urgency had not lessened. "We can't," she said. "They'll find us. They know we're here." Panic bubbled inside me, and I felt the shadows looming at the edges of my mind again. "But we have to do something. I can't just hide." Suddenly the room quaked and dust rained down from the ceiling like dark snow. A low growl rumbled through the air, and I turned to see shapes gathering outside the window, elongated and twisted. They were searching for us. "Now," she said, grabbing my hand. "We need to find the next door. It's the only way to escape." My heart raced. "How do we do that?" "We follow the light," she replied, pointing to a faint glow seeping through the floorboards. "But we have to be quick." Just then, the shadows burst through the walls, wrapping around the furniture and creeping closer. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, afraid to move. "Now!" she urged, her grip tightening on my hand. As I followed her toward the glow, dread filled me. Would the next door lead us to safety, or deeper into the nightmare? That's when I heard it. A whisper, chilling and malign. "You can't escape." Then everything went dark. I woke up gasping, the coldness of the air biting against my skin. My heart pounded as I surged upright in bed, blinking against the after effects of the dream, or whatever it was. The familiar outlines of my small apartment surrounded me, the walls holding secrets that I now wished to forget. My phone lay beside me, the screen cracked but glowing with life. As I cautiously swung my legs over the side of the bed, I noticed the sunlight streaming through the window, warm and inviting. A stark contrast to the darkness I had just escaped, though now I couldn't tell where I ended and the nightmare began. I reached out and grasped the knife I had left on my bedside table, still trembling at the memory of the fight. Then something caught my eye. My heart sank as I spotted a small collection of photos tucked neatly against my curtain. I approached cautiously, almost afraid to touch them. They were the same faces from before, blurred, unrecognizable, but still so achingly familiar. A chill settled into my spine. Had I returned to that place? Or was it all just a figment of my sleep-deprived mind? I picked one up carefully, staring at the image as it slipped from my grasp, fluttering down to the floor. But it wasn't the picture that terrified me. It was the sound of a familiar knock echoing gently from the front door. My breath hitched in my throat, and I almost turned away. Instinct urged me to flee, but curiosity held me rooted in place. The knock came again, a soft, rhythmic tapping. This time my heart raced with uncertainty, the whispers from my nightmare just below the surface of my consciousness. Still clutching the knife, I tiptoed to the door and peered through the peephole, my stomach twisting. An outline stood just outside, cloaked in shadow, too ethereal to make out any features. My breath caught as the knocking resumed, louder now, urgent and pleading. "Let me in." I recoiled as the echo of those words twisted through my mind. It felt all too familiar. Just as I faced the decision to retreat, my phone buzzed again, pulling me back from the brink of panic. I grabbed it, half expecting a message from a friend, but instead, the screen displayed an image I'd never seen before. It was me, standing at my window in the dark, my eyes wide with terror. A wave of nausea rolled through me as I recognized the depth of the shadows lurking behind me, almost inviting, casting a grisly reflection in the mirror of my own fear. I dropped the phone and stepped back, anxiety clawing at my chest. That was impossible. My heart thundered as I whirled around, searching the apartment. The girl would have known. She would have warned me about this. I could still see the urgency in her eyes, the stillness of her very presence in that chamber of shadows. But she wasn't here anymore. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. I felt tethered to my fear, and despite every instinct screaming at me to turn away, I found myself drawn closer. My fingers curled around the handle. Perhaps it was time to confront whatever awaited me. Time to face those shadows out in the light of day. Or maybe it was time to embrace whatever was behind that door. As the knocking reached a crescendo, I twisted the knob, the sound stopping as the door creaked open. A gust of cooler air rushed past me, but there was no one in sight. I stepped out into the hallway, peering around carefully. The once familiar space felt alien, charged with electricity. My heart raced as I moved forward, sensing shadows still tiptoeing around, blurring the edges of my reality. And in that moment I realized I wasn't just running to escape. I was drawn into the mystery, the thrill of danger enticing me, opening up a realm of possibilities. I took a step out, ready to plunge back into the unknown, knowing that while darkness lurked, so did light, and somewhere in between was my chance for answers. Maybe I could uncover the truth of a world where resolution was never guaranteed, where shadows and clarity danced closely together under the faintest glimmer of hope. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way to weaken those shadows once and for all, even if it meant venturing deeper into the enigma.